Welcome to Hot Dice. If you're watching this, you're probably interested in the latest data slate from Games Workshop. So that's what we're going to be talking about. And it's a good opportunity now because we've actually had a few majors tournaments come out in the last week or two. So we actually see the impact, compare it before and afterwards. But really we're just going to go with piece by piece, break it down. And so I'm Joshua, this is Ben.
Hello.
And
Adam.
There we go. So between us all, we all collect different armies. You've got what then?
Mainly T-Sons, GSC, Custodies would be my three core armies at the moment.
Yeah, big mix. Adam?
I'm a Nids player, pretty much exclusively. I've got half-built Gene Stealer Cult army and many different Necromunda gangs, but yeah, I'm a Tyranid player through and through.
As you probably know from watching our other videos, where we cover the Tyranid Codex and go and break that down and actually break it, hopefully. So, anyway.
After last night, I think we're getting there.
Yeah, I think so too. And I'm Josh, and I play Space Marines and Eldar for my sins. This feels like an AA meeting.
I play them well.
I play them reasonably well. I actually put them down for 10th because I like having friends. So I started playing Space Marines, didn't I? But that all changed. I played a tournament this weekend where all this new data slate took place, and I definitely felt the pinch.
Yeah.
I definitely felt the change, but anyway, we'll get down into it. So,
unfortunately, it was only a pinch.
It was only a pinch. All the wrong places.
They needed a slap and a couple of beats, I think.
Yeah, well, I was amazed. Actually, reading the data slate, I thought it was going to be a massive hit because it was all about that triggering the devastating wounds, the splashing. But let's get into it. So, I think Ben is our rules guru, really. So why don't you lead us off with the core rule changes in the data slate? So you have devastating wounds.
Yeah, death wounds. It was a needed change, I think. Beneficial for the game, not great for certain armies, certainly as a T-Sons player. Losing the death wounds, the ability to roll the damage into units from certain things like the Infernal Master, for example, were really beneficial, and it's taken quite a hit. But I think for the health of the game, it wasn't fun playing against a Wraith Knight and having an entire 10-man squad killed by one shot.
Yeah.
So I think it's a band-aid solution. I'm not convinced it's the permanent solution. I don't think it's going to fix things long term.
So let me just read it for everyone back there if you don't know already. So devastating wounds, the weapon with devastating wound in their profile are known as devastating wound weapons. Thanks for the Games Workshop. Each time an attack is made with such a weapon, if that attack scores a critical hit wound, so 6 to wound, that's natural, no saving throw of any kind can be made against that attack, including invulnerables. Such attacks are only allocated to models after all other attacks are made. So it's the same sequence. It's basically still taking out models without giving them the opportunity to save. It still allows feel no pains, but crucially it doesn't count as mortals.
Yes, and that, I think, if we look at the implications, it feels like a band-aid fix, because now inadvertently you've got armies like Custodies, you've got characters like Librarians and Space Marines that now have almost lost their entire ability to nullify mortal wounds, of which there's few and far between. So, I think we'll see how it evolves over the coming weeks and months. But
I mean, for me, no tears have been shed for Custodians because I always hate it. No, it is ridiculous, really. I feel like they've given with one hand and taken with the other.
Yeah, I think we'll see some of this later. I think we'll talk about the points change and the army impact on the data slate. But I think changing dead wounds fundamentally changed a lot of armies at their core. So it changed the way Eldar work, it changed the way T-Sons work, it's changed the way Custodies work in terms of saving themselves from damage. But at the same time, they also nerfed the stratagem use. They also increased the points. There was some armies were affected in 3 different ways. And I think that by now we're all experienced enough to know that when you make multiple changes, it's difficult to understand which one has the impact you're looking for.
And I do think as well, one of the problems with this rule change is the fact they've changed this rule in and then not looked at the data slates it's affecting.
Yes.
So, say for instance, let's talk about what I know. The new Norn Emissary has a 4-up, feel no pain, against mortal wounds.
Yeah.
So
Which there's few and far.
and obviously that's few and far between now, and it was obviously there to deal with dev wounds.
Yes.
And now that new massive monster just crumples under a dev wound attack, as I found out last night.
Well, that's what hasn't changed. The ability for, I mean, obviously we're seeing less and less Wraith Knights now, I think, in the meta.
They're dead.
But
They're dead.
it doesn't stop you being able to just auto 6 a D6 shot cannon, or again, from a T-Sun perspective, you've still got the ability to put mass dev wounds into a single target. So
and that's where it hurt the most.
That's
where there's
hurts.
single targets.
Yeah.
I think it's where there's multiple models. So if you've got a big blob of, say, Terminators with that chaplain, which gives them the 4+ against mortals, it's not really affected them as much. It has, but not as much as, say, a big monster, which you're just going to put everything into anyway. So you don't need those wounds to splash. And I think it's an oversight. I don't know why Feel No Pain doesn't work.
I think a good example is if you look at when they first launched all of the codexes, as we refer to them, the data slates for each army, there was a massive uproar about T-Suns being able to turn arm saves off, and there was a lot of furor in the community saying, well, that you shouldn't be able to do that. Actually, that kind of fell away because every single army almost has that ability. You just put dead wounds into something, and there's no interaction, there's no armor save, it's just dead.
And let's be honest, mortal wounds, where are they? You've got tank shock, you've got grenades, you've got some psychic abilities.
But you guys are getting dev wounds.
Yeah, well, my entire list, Eldar list is built around dev wounds.
Yeah, mortal wounds. So, I mean, I don't know I wouldn't be confident enough to say I have the solution, but I think it's the interaction from dead wounds with still the armies, despite the nerfs, that can put mass volume dead wounds into big targets are still very effective.
It's very professional.
They're still very effective. I mean, is there anything that comes to mind? Anything you'd change?
For what?
For this dev wounds interaction?
Yeah, simple. Just don't make it a mortal wound. But I think Feel No Pain was the idea of introducing Feel No Pain was to reintroduce those universal special rules that you could just apply to every model.
Yeah.
But then the problem is in the indexes they've specified 4+ Feel No Pain against mortal wounds.
Yeah, it's an oversight.
Yeah.
Feels like an oversight. It feels like an oversight, but then again, I guess if you go back to, say, an army like Custodians, arguably a 4+ Feel No Pain to everything on top of a 4+ Invon, 4 wound infantry, T5 and T6 units is too strong. So how do you, for an army that is based around that at its core, it's difficult to make these sorts of sweeping changes to fix.
I think it needs to be reviewed on a unit basis. Where you've got those rules, they need to look at that and like
they did for 10th edition, review every single
yeah.
Did they buggery?
Add new ability. I think dev wounds need to be changed. I'm happy with the change. I think it's better for the health of the game.
Yeah.
I do think longer term, and probably as we see codexes be released. Unfortunately, I think Tyranids have been. It's come too early. I think that's the problem. It's come too early. As the rest of the codexes evolve, I expect we'll see less of the 4+ to mortal wounds.
So I think we're going to come back to this because it's such a critical. It's basically the devastating wounds is a core mechanic of the game, so it's affected everything.
Yes,
but
huge.
Talking about another core mechanic, stratagem CP costs. So we were seeing a lot of the assassins in there. But this is the Kaidos assassin.
Yeah,
that gave you the increase to the CP cost. Really good at breaking down some armies that relied on that one critical CP stratagem. So, for instance, Phantasm for Eldar or whatever it might be. Now it seems that those can only affect CP battle tactics stratagems.
Which again, most armies have 1, maybe 2 if they're lucky. And combined with the other change, being able to only use 0 CP strats on battle tactic stratagems. I think it's been that for me has had a bigger impact on certain armies than the dev wounds change.
T-Suns in particular.
I think quite a few GSC, T-Suns Custodians not having access to their fight first. T-Suns not having access to indirect fire on their psychic weapons via warp sight. GSC and their ability to if you bring units back, it's slightly different.
That's to say this affects both So it goes, if it's a 0 CP, it can only be battle tactics, and if it's an increased CP, it's only battle tactics.
Yes, yeah,
so
absolutely.
just to clarify.
Absolutely, yeah. Basically, all strategy modifying elements and modifying a cost or using for free have been restricted to battle tactics. And again, I think the question is, was the Tyranids Codex produced with that in mind, or was it produced with the expectation you'd be able to use?
I'm going to say no, because I think they were probably printed about 6 months ago.
Yeah, that again, I think, comes back into that, which is a slightly different topic. But this for me has been, I think, a more impactful change, because it was also very big in terms of how you play your armies, because it's an easy one that slips through the radar with a focus on dev wounds, but it's actually pretty comprehensive. The ability, suddenly losing the ability to use any one of your 6 stratagems for free is huge. It's absolutely huge.
And that leads,
I also think this goes against their original brief. This is brief creep, as you'd say in the industry, is that they're trying to make it simple but not simplistic. You now have to know what every single stratagem that everyone has and what category it falls into.
And with the NIDs having, what, 30,
yeah.
Sorry, 30 new stratagems? Is
Yeah.
it 5 new detachments they have, or 6?
6 new.
6.
Well, 5 new and 1 existing.
So, okay, 36 strats.
And we are weeks away from 7, is it, for Space Marines?
Yeah.
I think it's 7 new detachments.
7?
I believe it's 7, yeah, off the top of my head. So you're talking about 6 new stratagems for 7. So as with this simple game is suddenly very quickly evolving into having the knowledge of what stratagem types each army have and which ones they can reuse.
Which is completely unfair. And on the back of that, with the NID release, I now can't actually read any of the data slates in my app that I subscribe to, which makes it very difficult for me to know in advance the opponent.
Yeah, exactly. You're going to have to go into a tournament with a printout of what everyone's stratagems is for each detachment, so I can know. It's like, okay, he's just phantasmed. Is that a battle tactic? Can I increase that by 1 CP?
Well, we'll put in another episode. We're actually going to review a tournament myself and Ben attended on the weekend where we actually played this new data slate. And I think
Interesting.
You'll see, like, you played the new NID Codex, I played the new NID Codex. The difference is I studied that and I knew all the stratagems. Ben didn't have the time and went into it blind and was at the mercy of his opponent. Absolute mercy on the honesty of when they can use it, how they can use it, what units can they use it on, and it turned out that there was a certain amount of foul play there.
It's understanding. Again, with new players playing new codexes, we've already, a few weeks into this new edition, moved away from the ability for everyone to very clearly have access and see, okay, what can that do? Can I understand it? Can I study it? Well, no, because I've not paid for access to the Tyranids Codex.
And how many factions are there? 18, 19 factions? I'm not buying all those codexes. Sorry, Games Workshop.
Yeah. Something actually tells me there's as many as 30 now.
Okay.
That sounds a surprise, but I think there's a substantial amount of armies you can go out and buy now.
We have digressed beyond digression. Yeah. So, leading from the stratagem thing, I think, what was it? It's once per phase one. So this is a big one for your Ursula Creeds, who just had a blanket. Let's clarify here. It says, for rules that allow the use of a stratagem, even if another unit has already been targeted by that stratagem, this phase or turn, but that do not specify the name of said stratagem, can only be used battle tactics.
So the characters like
in English,
the Eldar, I always forget which one of the characters it is.
So Azuman has
the Overwatch one,
but it specifies Overwatch.
Yeah, so that's immune to this. But for most, if you look at all the shield captains and custodians, for example, the Space Marine captains that have the blanket, you can reuse a stratagem. What was I guess really defined the way you played and the way you built your list with those
100%.
units.
I used to do it all the time with Space Marines.
And I think it's quite early in the edition to suddenly substantially change people's play styles. I think that's another topic of conversation. But this has been impactful, certainly for the way I play my armies. This has completely changed the way you have to play them because the play styles that were available before just aren't available anymore.
No, and I suppose we can get into that when we start looking at the league tables, which I'm sure we can find in a moment. But sticking with stratagems then, Overwatch has been changed. So this is a big one for Eldar. which I definitely felt on the weekend because I took D cannons.
Yep.
And I can safely say they probably won't be in my list in future, just because
Thank God.
they can't Overwatch indirectly anymore, which is fair enough because it's broken. With Fate Dice, you just pop that 6. I don't care if I can't see it. You're dead. So that's gone. So just to clarify, when can you use it? Still the opponent's movement phase, charge phase, just after it's been set up, or when the enemy starts or ends a normal move, advance or fallback or charge move. So that can happen at any time, basically, where you can trigger a normal move. So we clarify. Target 1 unit in your army within 24 of the enemy unit that would be eligible to shoot. So what's changed? The effect. If that enemy unit is visible to your own unit, so visible only,
Direct is gone.
that's gone. Restrictions. You cannot target Titanic units with a stratagem, so knights,
Change.
Wraith Knights, for instance, can't use it. So that's another hit. So this is why I don't think you're going to see Wraith Knights anymore. A, because they had a massive points increase. B, because dead wounds don't roll. And B, because and C, sorry, they can't Overwatch.
They can't use it anymore. And yeah, I would say on the side of that, it's good we now have clarity. You can use it once per phase, regardless of because you now can't use 3 stratagems because it's not a battle tactic.
No.
So I think we finally, on the plus side, have the clarity that you cannot keep popping multiple Overwatches, which is a good thing. The Titanic changes, I think, for me, it feels like that was made purely for Wraith Knights. I don't know how often people were overwatching on big nights, for example.
I think you must, because the volume of fire they could put out potentially.
Yeah, perhaps on the 18 weapon, they get the Imperial Knights get to reroll 1 on a hit roll. So I don't know if you're spending all your CP on overwatching with big knights before the patch change. You probably won't win many games, would be my opinion.
Probably.
But I think it's a decent change, but it feels targeted at 1 or 2 specific Titanic models that were just going. There you go. There's an Overwatch. There's 6. That's a D6 plus 6 death wounds, which they can still do. Let's not forget, Wraith Knights can still just pop out
With the Fate Dice.
Yeah, with Fate Dice, they can still put into it if you want to take a big unit down.
You can't do it in Overwatch.
Because can't do that.
That's a big change, because before, if you were, say, hiding a unit from a Wraith Knight, and then you move out, I could just wait for you to come out, basically, and then I would shoot you.
I do think, having experience in the game recently, a 4-minute Overwatch with my opponent who had many guns on a big unit, I'm all for interactive play, and I think it is interesting to be able to react to your opponent's turns. I'm not sure having to sit through massive Overwatches from huge Titanic units and lots of shooting when you just want to get on with your movement phase is perhaps the interaction that we wanted in the game.
Yeah, I do think it now makes my Warlord Titan completely unplayable.
Well, I suppose we could skip the next stratagem and go straight into the towering rules then, because that's really very relevant here.
Yeah.
So it's not really a change to the towering rules, it's a change to the ruin rules. Actually.
Yes,
So ruins, which, let's be honest, populate 100% of most tables. Because it's nice and easy, you can't see through it, gives you cover, blah 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 blah. It's the easiest terrain to use. So it's how it interacts with towering that's changed. So towering models now have to be that are within terrain features. You must only see through it. They can't now
not
just
wholly.
see
They've just got to.
Yeah, it doesn't say wholly.
Tap in.
So they just got to tag in, and then they can see through it. That's huge. I think initially my thoughts go to offensive, but what else?
Well, it's defensive as well, isn't it? You're not shooting a knight off the table because it's got nowhere to hide anymore.
Absolutely.
Yeah, which must have been frustrating for knights. But yeah, it is a lot of offensive as well. You can actually hide from knights now.
Yeah. The first few weeks of 10th, I think we all experienced knights just shooting everything off the table because we were playing. We were used to playing old terrain models, ruins with windows, passable terrain, and suddenly we had to change the whole dynamic of the table because, well, do you know what, let's just take windows away. And I think we saw in most games and most tournaments, people went to, everything ground floor is just, you can't see through it. I feel like you lost a bit of that tactical ability to be able to shoot in and out of cover, run into ruins.
So you missed that.
I missed that. Yeah, I like to be able to position a unit behind a ruin and be able to move in and shoot, knowing that I was going to be able to get some cover from that, knowing that I was going to be able to dip in and shoot when I want to be available. Versus now, everything being ground floor windows.
Not windows, sorry.
Everything being blocked on the first floor. I think, in my opinion, it's not as exciting.
Well, that would just be ITC, right? So we will cover a video where we look at WTC and ITC because we play tournaments that have done both now.
Yes, both formats.
And I think all of us.
But they've all been ground floor blocking. That's what's been interesting.
Yeah.
Will that change now? The tower rules have changed. You could argue that you could reintroduce visible ruins on the ground floor now because a knight is going to have to touch you to shoot you.
That's down to the tournament organisers. That's got nothing to do with Games Workshop. We'll see, to be honest. And then, well, that covers that, I think, to be honest. So it's great defensively, great offensively. I think it's a good move, actually.
I think knights are happy. I think the knight players that we have in our local community and the meta we play in have found it beneficial.
To be honest, their ranking hasn't shifted substantially.
No, Chaos Knights seem to have jumped up a little bit.
Okay.
They had some reductions in some of the key units, I think.
And then I guess this is a very interesting one here for Adam because insane bravery changes. There's a lot of triggers in the new NID Codex. So what can you tell us about the insane bravery?
Well, the insane bravery check I think is great. There's nothing worse than doing that critical shadowing the warp and doing battle shocks against all the unit, one unit passing, and then someone going, "That's the CP. It's fine. That was just a waste of 5 minutes of my time."
Yeah.
It's a big one, especially with the new invasion fleet. It's not invasion fleet. Vanguard detachment. Getting my own detachment trunk. Why am I in? Because there's opportunities that, okay, mainly in my phase I could battle shock you 4 or 5 times across the board using different units.
Experienced that. It's not fun.
No, maybe not for you.
So I guess we'll cover it, but it's worth mentioning, isn't it, that battle shock mechanic in the NIDs now. They can pump out so many. Not in your turn. But in the NID player's turn, I should say.
And obviously not just NIDs. I think if you look at armies like Chaos Knights, which revolved around battle shocks and reducing your leadership prior to this data slate, it was a nonsensical detachment role. It did nothing. It really achieved nothing. So I think the change is a good one. Why in the first place you ever have a rule where you can roll the dice, see if you've passed, and then not, then pay a CP to re-roll it? I think for me that really took the importance off of that roll. Be able to go, how many battle shocks have you actually found, in fairness?
Well, as of before this weekend, 0. But I played the NID player with 2 Noro lictors, just all the battle shock. I think I rolled 8 battle shock tests that game and failed all but 1.
That's an extreme.
That is an extreme because that's 6+ leadership.
It's a good change.
I don't think Eldar should be 6+ leadership, but that's another conversation.
It's ridiculous.
It's impactful. It's made some other interactions more fun. Say Chaos Knights, demons, NIDs, and what they do with battle shocks. I think I prefer it to the old morale rules.
They were convoluted. It's hard to teach to new players.
Make those morale rules.
I prefer the system. I think it wasn't what they intended up until this point, and now just this subtle change I think makes it a bit more impactful.
Hopefully, because I think it's a hold mechanic in the game that really, if Games Workshop want to add diversity to the playstyles of different armies, they should make every part of the game matter. So that they can have each faction lean into a certain part of the game, and I think it's cool that you can have an army that revolves around failing battle shots.
CP's a rarity, it feels, and certainly the games I'm playing I'm often starved for CP. Having in the back of your mind that turn 5 I'm going to have to save this CP because if I lose this objective in no man's land I can lose the game. That wasn't there before.
It makes it more tactical as well, because you've got a unit on a thing. Okay, you may pass that battle shock. If you're Eldar, you've got a 50% chance of passing that battle shock. Not that I'm bitter, but then you've got to go, this is too important for
Yes,
me to lose this on the last thing.
Yeah.
I've got 1 CP left. Okay, I'm going to have to use it.
Before I have the roll, I'll pass the test. There's no pressure there. So good change, I think.
I can remember a few times where I've very smugly failed this battle shock and gone, oh well, pass.
Yes.
And strangely, so can I. I think it's burnt into the back.
And that's gone.
Right.
Yeah. That has gone, which is fine.
Talk to my psychologist about it every week.
But I will give a very slow hand clap to GW. I think, as a whole, as a data slate, I think I'd have to say overall they were good changes. I think there was good changes to the game. I don't think they're perfect, but I think from where we were, with 2 or 3 armies running away at 65 and the 70% win rates, it's a good start.
I mean, I took Eldar to the tournament this weekend, first time out of the box for the tournament, 10th edition. I got 2nd place with 3 wins. It was a small player pool, to be frank. But every opponent I played against was still like same old Eldar, you know. Because actually, unfortunately, none of these have changed some of the really harsh stuff, like the fire prisms. Well, that's not true because actually you can't phantasm. There's been changes to the factions. Obviously, you can't phantasm vehicles anymore. Only infantry. That's a big change. But let's be honest, it's the Incarn. The Incarn's had no changes.
How the Incarn didn't have any tweaks. I think actually keep the don't put the points increases in. Let the Wraith Knight still do his overwatches, but change the Incarn. I think has a bigger impact.
Oh yeah. The fact that it can teleport every phase, still phase, not turn, all round.
It can attack you in combat. You can kill another unit off the board, and it can jump away before you get hit.
Which we experienced.
It's insane.
When I was playtesting it against Ben here, I'd run in with my Incarn against Magnus. Did my hits.
3 hits.
Then
killed something else.
The Avatar charged something else. That killed something, and then the Incarn jumped out before the retribution for Magnus could be realised.
Looking at the list for last week's tournaments, I think 90% of the Eldar armies had Avatar and Incarn in them. I think that kind of double.
That double threat. You've got to choose one of them, and the one you don't choose is going to mess you up.
They're expensive, but they're good units.
Yeah.
So faction rules. Do we want to break it down? So Adeptus Custodes. Ben is really.
I have some thoughts on this. I never like to see changes where I feel like GW have fundamentally changed the play style of an army. And all the way through 9th edition into 10th edition, I think one of the ways, the enjoyable ways of playing Custodians was having your bricks of Wardens, your bricks of Guard, put in a shield captains, bringing the Captain General himself, and marching into battle. That was what felt like the lore behind Custodians. To suddenly turn around now and say, well, you can't have units of 5 now. I think, yes, they're battle line, you can still bring 6 of them, but I think it was a way to play. I don't like the change to the bikes, the Praetors, being someone who owns 20 of the Custodians bikes myself. Now capping that to the maximum you can have on the list is 9 is quite substantial. So I don't like the way they've reduced the maximum amount you can have in a unit for Custodians. I think it changes the way they play.
It seems odd in combination with the removal of the devastating wound protection.
It feels they've lost their wounds, their prices went up, and they now have their units capped. So again, Wardens can only be in groups of 5, Guard can only be in groups of 5. I feel a bit sorry for those players out there that might have run a 10 brick of Wardens or 30 Custodians, and now actually in 5-man groups, point efficiency, you can't bring a shield captain for each. It doesn't feel like a solving, it feels like they've changed the way they play. Personal opinion, but I don't.
I think if there's a fundamental problem with an army, though, you can't help but change the mechanics.
No, but
how they play.
The problem. I don't know if there was a fundamental problem with the army, because let's be honest, I know the problem with the army was the ability to have big blocks of Guard and Wardens and fight first and spam fight first across the board. They've solved that with the stratagem changes. So to then also increase points and then to change the way their units can be built. As we've seen, I think we saw custodians drop down to low 40s.
Well, do we have that table actually to hand?
Because
let's see if we can find it. But
yeah, I mean, we'll see how it evolves because people will change their lists and people will find ways to play. I just think for me, it's a shame if you've invested in an army, you've invested in models, and you've spent all that time painting, and then all of a sudden you can't take your models anymore. I feel like there's a better way. Could they have increased points? Could they have reduced the amount of attacks each model gets, for example? Would that have been a better balance than saying you just can't take as many anymore? I don't know. It's probably more difficult to balance.
Multiple changes, isn't it?
Yeah, they've been hit in three different ways: points, stratagems, unit sizes. So we'll see. I have faith in Custodes. Keep rolling those 4s, nothing matters. So
just roll
keep
4.
rolling those other than against Dev Wounds, obviously. If we do see I feel like we might see we've got a Custodes Codex coming early next year, spring to 24, I think it is. I expect we'll see a change. Well, we're going to see new detachments. So I think Custodes will be okay. I think the other reflection to take on it is an army being at mid 45%, 40%, is that actually a bad thing? People probably wouldn't have complained if that's where they were before the data slate. So
I think it's a very common army because of the nature of how cheap it is.
Yeah.
And so any changes to Custodes has a big impact on the tournament scene. So perhaps initially there'll be some backlash from any change. I think I'm leaning towards agreeing with you, by the way.
Yeah.
Probably too many, too much too soon. And it's hard for me to say that because I do hate Custodes, but
it's the unpredictability of them. You can't plan for them rolling 4s.
You can't.
That's the matchup dislike. Now going from playing them to playing into them, I have to say it's perhaps not a enjoyable experience, but I do think I do feel like they've been
admittance of guilt. I hear that.
I think
finally
again changes that were made to tone down the ridiculous overpoweredness of Eldar and GSC have inadvertently had impact on other armies as well. And I know they don't want them to suddenly they don't want Custodes to become 65-70%. I just feel like at the moment it appears to be too hard.
I can't find the tables from pre and post. I know you had them, Ben. I don't know if you wanted to have a look at them while I talk about Adeptus Mechanicus. So this is the one that everyone scoffed at.
Yeah.
Have you seen this one, Adam?
It's yeah.
Do you know anything about it?
No.
Well, I had the pleasure of playing Adeptus Mechanicus this weekend against Ash. I can't remember his last name, but he's on the Wales WTC team. He was no slouch. Very good player. And I scoffed at this change initially. So it's basically you go from their rangers now have a 4+ instead of 5+ invulnerable. Oh, sorry, they get 4+ save and a 5+ invuln. So that's a change there. And the Vanguard also get the same, so they get a 4+ save and 5+ invuln. Now, I think they had a 6+ before. The reason why this might matter is because I didn't realise this, but the entire army bounces off these guys.
Yeah.
Being within 6 of these allows other units in the army to get rerolls.
Okay.
So they are attacks. They also include. You have to have them potentially to make the rest of the army work. So just making that a little bit more durable.
Yeah.
Because you only need one guy to
cover
live.
as well. Put someone to a 3-up in cover,
Exactly.
which you're happy with.
Most of the time they're out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah.
But if they're not, that 5+ invuln, it's probably the difference between having one guy left and no guys left in a 10-man squad under focused fire. And that's still going to allow the units to have their buffs. So we'll see. We'll see how they do. Not a great change. Eldari, the big one. Phantasm, my favourite stratagem. Can only target infantry. Fairs is fair.
It needed something doing. There's nothing worse than setting all your fire lines up, setting your charges up, and then that big unit that was just about to die goes, I'm over here now.
Saw it coming.
Yeah.
Do you think we'll see the introduction of more infantry into Eldar lists because of this change?
The problem I have now, I love Aspect Warriors, and in 9th I used to run a pretty poor meta list, let's put it that way. I didn't have the meta list at all because I loved having one of every aspect in there if I could get away with it and just seeing about playing shenanigans. My issue is that Aspect Warriors, to get the same amount of firepower as 9th, probably need to spend twice the points on them now. Have they no more general? You have, that's great.
Yeah, I was having to root through hundreds of pitches.
So, for instance, Dire Adventures was my favourite unit Always has been. It's one of the reasons I started collecting Eldar in the first place. I don't know where it was. It's the mop on the top of their head, I guess. And just anyway, and they just, what are they now? They're 140 points for 10. You have to put Azumin in there. He's got 120 points. Suddenly you're talking insane amount of points for a 10-man squad that's toughness 3 and has AP 1, strength 4 weapons.
Yeah. How many shots do they get each?
They get 3 shots each.
Yeah. So a 10-man, 30 shots down range.
Hit on 2. So you're putting a lot of fibre out there, but they've still only got AP 1 damage. Now, when you're putting that into perspective, 260 points gets you a lot of killing and a lot of durability in most armies. We're talking hellfire.
And I think this summarises for me where the Eldar changes went a bit wrong.
Yeah.
Changing Phantasm, yes, you perhaps lose some of the tanks, or you drop a fire prism or 2, but it's not like you haven't got anything else that's ridiculously overpowered to fill the space. And that's where I think if we look at, I have got win rates now, we saw Eldar drop to 60% from 69. 60%.
And this is in 30 plus.
Yeah.
So, when they bracket it, they do it in the tournaments that have less than 30 and tournaments that have
20
more.
on these. Less than 20.
61%
win rate on tournaments. And then if we look at the impact in other armies, Custodia is down to 47%, Thousand Sons down to 45%,
wow.
GSC down to I know they were right at the bottom somewhere, I can't see.
They can't be at the
top of my GSC were running at 61%. So
let's break it down. Where's the Dectus Mechanicus? Because I know they were in the bottom 40s.
Admech jumped up to 58%. So we saw a massive jump, but they had huge points reductions as well.
Yeah.
So
in combination.
Yeah, in combination. So what we've seen is some real jumps. I think me and Adam discussed this earlier. One thing the data slate has done is, yes, there's a lot more armies now in that Goldilocks zone, but it feels like they haven't balanced the game. What they've done is create 50% of armies you can beat and 50% you can't beat. So there's a lot of armies in that position where, depending on the matchup,
potentially, I think what you have to take into account as well is the number of players, because obviously if in a field of 80% Eldar, if you're still managing a 50% win rate, that's solid.
Yeah,
that's really solid. I mean, I'm not saying 80% is Eldar.
No, we've seen most of the other top 3 or 4 have seen at least a 10% drop, between 5 and 10% drop. So I think that's the question: is the changes that were made to just seeing Eldar have points increases, and the expectation the changes to the game mechanics would solve it, seems to have not been as effective as they'd hoped.
But I still don't want to put Howling Banshees or Spiders or Striking Scorpions or Fire Dragons. Maybe they're pretty good, but still, why would I do that if I put an Avatar in? That's the problem.
Yeah, that's the issue. They haven't
increased
the diversity of the lists.
Yeah. So what are they doing? I took an army to that tournament. I think it had a grand total of 25 models in it for a 2,000 point army. They're not even doing this to sell models, are they? Because
it's the game has got to a point where there's so many armies, so many attachments. We saw with a full attempt to rebalance the game in 10th at the start, the data cards, we saw what happened. I think it's a long process. The first data slate was positive. I just think there's a few. I wouldn't be surprised if we see perhaps some little tweaks.
So how have Death Guard been impacted? Because Death Guard have had a big change. I think they had changed the points. They've obviously had to change the detachment rule, which gives them an extra aura. So I'll just read it because I'm not fully behind it myself. During the declare battle formation step, you can select one of the sicknesses below. Until the end of the battle, all units from your army with Nurgle's gift ability gain the selected sickness. So Skull Squirm, Blight, Aura. While an enemy unit is within contagion range of this, which obviously increases as the battle goes on, worsen the Ballistic Skull and Weapon Skill. That's great. That's good. By 1. Rattle Join.
It is, in theory. I'll come into that in a minute.
What's that? It is in theory.
Death Guard changes.
Oh, I see. Oh no, what are you going to tell me? While an enemy unit is within contagion range of this unit, worsen the saving characteristic. Fair enough. The bandit leans into their more aggressive nature in 10th, which isn't working out for them. And then there's Scarbarous Soul Rot Aura. While an enemy unit is within contagion range of a unit, worsen the leadership and objective control characteristics of that model enemy unit by 1 to a minimum of 1. Okay. That's basically it.
After reading that and not knowing much about Death Guard, What's the contagion range?
So, I'll share my thoughts on this. Comes back to the point I just made about what the balance seems to have done is made some armies better against other armies, but no better against half the field. So it hasn't really balanced it in the fact where you play an army and you've got a chance. Against half the armies you're going to win, against half the armies you're going to lose. There's some situations like that.
So why?
So Death Guard. So where Death Guard were really weak was that they were very slow, they had very little movement. So against armies like Tau, against playing Dark Eldar, playing Eldar, quick movement armies, they struggled, they couldn't get near them. The contagion range changes sound fantastic, but you've got to be in contagion range.
Which is short, I think it starts at 3, 6, 9.
And it grows as the game goes on.
Yeah.
In all honesty, if you're playing Eldari, and you're spending the battle within 3 inches of Death Guard Terminators or Death Shroud, to get the -1 weapon skill, ballistic skill, then you're playing it wrong.
True, but I mean, the weapon skill is going to affect you, right? 'Cause it's going to reduce my impact in terms of
if you're in the contagion range. That's what I mean. It's a good change. We've seen them jump up.
Which you will be if you're in combat.
We've seen them jump up on. They're up to about 47% win rate. So it's been great for Death Guard. 47% at the moment. So
where were they? They were like
they were
30 odd.
38, 39. So
it's had some impact.
It's a good jump. It's put them in the Goldilocks zone. I just think as an army, they're still going to be no better into certain matchups because you're just going to be avoiding that contagion range. Yes, it's going to impact you when you try and take an objective off of them. They still have their sticky objectives and they can make them have contagions. I just don't know if it's.
They had some points drops as well. Right?
Yes, it's good. They're positive. They're winning. I'm just not. I think it's good for certain into Space Marines armies like that. You're going to have to get in close. You're going to have to fight them. So for some matchups, great. Others, I'm not sure how much of an impact it's had. But Death Guard players, I'm sure you'll leave in the comments to tell me how wrong I am.
Well, let's see.
But
we have got a Death Guard player, but he didn't put them in his box.
No, he didn't put them in the box. I mean, that's the question.
And leave them alone.
It's much better than what they had.
Yeah.
So I mean, let's be honest, it's better than what they had. I think it's one you can play around, however, if you know what you're doing.
These are your favourites here. We've got Death Watch. So I think these guys have benefited a lot from the changes to Devastating Wounds. We'll see. But what can you tell us about Death Watch?
I think there's been an impact. Obviously, the kill teams are pretty vicious.
Yeah.
Having a kill team full of 4 damage hammers, 3 damage hammers,
with Cyclone missile launchers,
would just point at a unit, delete it with rolling dev wounds. That they have seen an impact from that. I mean, I think the killability they bring now in terms of mass damage is slightly reduced. The stratagem changes are the big ones because they've lost the ability to just apply to their grav cannons and the frag cannons and all the real heavy weapons. Again, they could just go, let's give these sustain, let's make these anti-monster, let's make these anti-vehicle.
Yeah.
That's impactful.
Awful to play against.
Yeah,
if it was a bad match, if you just so happen to have the rock paper scissors matchup where you're on the wrong side of it, what brutal list.
I think that the changes are good. I think it has taken some of the damage profiles away. I still feel like you've got the possibility again, if you run into Death Watch and they happen to be running a certain build, then you have a 0 chance to win that game.
Potentially. Well, they get all the stuff that Marines get as well.
They can very much. I think they're a game at a competitive level in a tournament. You can see why Death Watch are perhaps sub 50%, somewhere around there. Solid army when they're having to play into a wide range. I think they're an army.
Some of the best players in the world are playing them. Right?
Yes, they're very effective.
But their win rate doesn't reflect that. And I wonder if that's just because the rest of the field is perhaps inexperienced.
At the end of the day, they are still Space Marines.
Yeah.
So they're strong. There's lots of them you can play. They do lose access to a lot of the Space Marine units, so they don't have the same variety. They're very good at what they do, and I think they will continue to be strong. I think the changes were good changes. Dev Wounds has impacted them, and the ammo changes it stops you from being able to. You couldn't engage them. You were just, especially if they bring up a unit that's rocking anti-Xenos and your GSC or your NIDS or the kill teams are focused around.
Have you played them?
I've not had the chance to play against them yet. I'm sure I will in the coming weeks. But I think on a one-on-one basis, if you're playing a friendly game and you're playing a Death Watch that knows what you play, which
Yes,
if you're
you're in
playing against me, you know I'm going to be a Xenos army. I'm in trouble because they're just going to build an anti-Xenos army, and no matter what I build, if I bring Horde, if I bring Monster Mash, everything's probably dying on the 2+. So
yeah. So what we have is we have a league system. So we kind of have fixtures, and you know who your next opponent is in the next round. So you can change your list. And what we've found is that they can be pretty brutal in that circumstance because they just have the tools for everything.
You can tailor it, and where you know what ammo to use in your stratagem,
exactly.
Plan for it.
Whereas in the tournament, you don't know, right? So you've got to build around that, having a more balanced list, which I think drastically weakens the entire thing, unless you get lucky. But
you can build. I mean, as you can see, some of the top players are playing. You can build with. It's a very strong all-rounder, and if it's played well, it's going to do an awful lot of damage.
It's Space Marines a plus, right?
Yeah,
and Space Marines are
absolutely.
great. I think they're solid.
They're a good solid army. The slight tweaks, I think, on the bolt weapons are good because you're not just throwing out constant. You haven't got an entire 10-man unit, and every single weapon's going to do dead wounds on a 4 against infantry.
Yeah, we've got the Space Marine Codex coming out soon, so I'm wondering how that's going to impact Death Watch, or if it even will.
In theory, any Space Marines can play any of the detachments, is what I've said. So actually, as a Death Watch army, in theory, because they still get access to over moment things at the moment.
Yeah, at the moment.
In theory, that gives Death Watch 7 more ways to play.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering, whether I've not seen the data cards themselves, whether they reference the Oath of Moment card, or they have their own version of it.
They use the Oath of Moment, the army rule. The detachment rule is the Death Watch rule. The army rule, they can pick Oath of Moment as the standard Space Marine army rule.
Right, okay, so maybe that'll change.
Yeah,
so
it's strong.
Talking of G-Seal cults, just in time for you to start your new army, it seems to take a massive hit.
Yeah, and that, if I'm honest, I expected that. I've started to collect Gene Steers because, one, I wanted a Horde army, 2, I fully expected they were going to get hit quite hard, and actually, from my perspective, I quite like that. I want to get involved in something that, like yourself and Eldar, it's no fun playing an army where you just got to turn up and put the stuff on the board, and chances are you've won the game.
It's just no fun for you. It's no fun for your opponent because they're just taking toys off, right?
Yeah.
There's no chance for them to play back.
Yeah, GSC, I would say and against what we've been talking about, GSC needed to be hit in 2 or 3 places. Just putting the points up wasn't going to solve the problem. Just changing the stratagems wasn't going to solve the problem.
So what was the core mechanic before? How's it changed?
The issue with Gene Steers before was that effectively you could build a list around your battle line troops. You could bring in 6 big bricks of 20 neophytes, lots of acolytes, and you knew that you could just chuck a 20-man unit in, it would die, and you could just bring it back.
Yeah.
There was no role involved, it was a battle line unit you had, so effectively you were talking about you could put 100 of them in, you'd have 5 squads, and then you knew that was at least another 100 coming back later in the game, and if you played with your blips well and you positioned them well, you just had this never-ending horde of seismic cannons, all this damage you could throw out, and you knew you could put 40 acolytes, and you could kill a Magnus, you could kill an Angron, you could kill anything in the game with that for a couple of CP, and then once they died, you pop them into reserves. That combined with the ability for free stratagem, so you could get everything extra AP, you could get everything -1 to wound. The combos were so powerful that just putting up points didn't solve it. So I think this is when I say the way they did the balance slate. Some of the changes they made feel like they were aimed at 1 or 2 specific armies. So rather than fixing the army, they changed the dynamics of the whole game.
I don't blame them, because that's probably how I would have done it. I would have looked at the fact that GC and Eldar are 65 plus win rate and gone,
what
can we do that affects both? And devastating wounds as well, because obviously there's the bike, the pods or the bikes that have to.
There was issue that was fixed earlier. That wasn't. They weren't seeing much play at tournament level because of the power. Once they fixed that in the first data change to say that you couldn't then double dip into the dev wounds, it just went mass infantry. what they've done to try and combat that is obviously change the way units come back. So now for battle line, in turns 1 and 2, you actually get +1 to your roll. You get +1 for being battle line. So now you're coming back on a 3-up.
Yeah.
As the turns go on, you're coming back on a 4-up. So it's still a 50-50, but it changes. You can't rely on knowing I'll just build around this battle line unit because I'm going to have.
I think it's a big change.
Big change, but they still perform very well at the tournament scene. So
I'm more likely to actually want to finish off that unit, while before when you're playing Genestealer Cult, you're like, okay, there's 1 or 2 units here. He's going to have to make me kill that on his turn to bring it back, because there's that risk that now they're not going to come back.
Yeah, it's now much more risky. Do you know what? If I'm going to go and put a 300-point unit of aberrants and a character, and I'm going to run them into something to kill, and I still know that on a 50% chance that non-battle line unit is coming back, well, actually,
it does sound like you're removing agency from your opponent, and I think that's how people feel when they're playing Eldar. They feel like they haven't got a choice. They're not playing a game. Yeah. They're just going to turn it into a 6, dev wound me, and then take it off. And there's nothing I could have done. There's no interaction there.
There's no learnings. I hate playing a game and coming out of it, and I feel I've learned nothing from this at all.
Yeah.
I didn't make any mistakes.
I just took my toys off.
Yeah, there is definitely, what I would say, the element of these changes, they're good changes. I think they will see the impact. The question mark is, we're playing a game of dice, and it's like going up against Custodians. If the GCS player just keeps rolling 5s to bring his units back, then actually the impact is much more minimal. Yes, the odds say that isn't going to happen, but we've all been in that game where they just keep rolling what they need. So, good change. We'll see the power level come down. I think there'll be some change to the list, perhaps changing the way, maybe not double character, not having it was basically Nexus and Primus in every 20-man squad with the way you played. The list was written. I think this adds some more variety, which is good. We might see the return of the superior pure steam Genestealers into GSC armies. The better Genestealers than Nids have. I'll just chuck that in.
100% the reason that we're not allowed to take Genestealer Cult as an allied detachment, because no one would take Tyranny Genestealers.
They'd still sell Genestealer models.
Yeah.
They would.
But they can, but they just sell them to GSC players now instead.
Yeah.
So that's the benefit. I think
moving on.
Good overall. Good changes. We'll see what happens.
Thanks, that's great. So we have Grey Knights, which, I've only ever played against them. I know the only change they've had is they've had one of their stratagems changed from the battle stack.
Yeah, did have a lot of point decreases.
A lot of points decreases they needed.
I think a couple more squads.
They were dog crap.
Yeah,
they just couldn't score. What's their win rate now?
I know it was a positive improvement. So Grey Knights. Let's have a look on here.
Because I played
flat bomb.
They were on
that one,
yeah, 37%. But this obviously is before there was only 18 players playing them, so it was quite a minimal work. I mean, my understanding from talking to a couple of players and again looking at some of the other information on the internet is that they're positive changes. You have seen people like Jack Hunster playing them in Art of War. He's taken Grey Knights on, plays them very well, wins games convincingly. So I think they're an army that's quite complex.
Yeah, having played them, I couldn't catch the buggers. So I had to commit. I was playing a pretty crap Eldar list on the weekend. It was very slow, lots of slow elements in it. That meant I just couldn't catch them. So I was moving into the midfield, and there was rules where if you get within 9, they're disappearing. If you shoot at them, they're disappearing. If you charge them, they're disappearing.
And your turn, pick 2 off the board.
And they're coming back. And they're coming down with impunity almost. And I just couldn't cover the whole board.
No, but you can cut, and I think you can cover enough. And if you're taking 2 or 3 units off each time, and you've then got the opportunity to, that's coming.
If I was playing a Horde army, I think they'd probably struggle, because you're right, they'd just be pinned into their corner.
Yeah, where do they actually go, and how do they score those? Well, there's so much of the secondary game and the primary game now focused on, especially the way it works at the moment, with the objectives can be moving around and all these bits and pieces, is jumping off the board is powerful and coming back in. Having had a game against a guard player yesterday, great if you've got 3 squads of 20 infantry and reserves, but if you can't come back onto the board, what use are they? And I think Grey Knights perhaps fall into that trap slightly. As a less experienced player, it sounds great.
Just because you can do it,
I can do it.
Doesn't
just because you can.
That's what it was. I think I was playing. Once I learned the tricks and I knew not to do or move into certain areas and do certain things, I could track them down.
Tricky Army look great. I think they're fun to play. I think they're probably quite fun to play against because it keeps you on your toes.
I didn't know what to do.
I don't think they're oppressive, and I think that's what's good about them. I don't know if they have the kill power.
It's just, at the end of the day, the only good gun they've got is a side cannon, and it's a strength 8. You know, -2 something. I think off the top of my head, maybe 3, maybe 2 damage. It ain't changing the world, you know.
Maybe they could do with a pit 2 more of AP, or
they need AP on their bolters, and that would make them formidable, I think.
They're fun army.
Imperial Knights. So this is just to do with their bonds and ability. It doesn't affect their own anymore. So a lot of knights complaining about this, but has it really impacted their win rate that much?
I'm not sure about the win rate. I think it impacts the play style because there was quite a focus to position, obviously, your big knights with the little knights in range, so they could bounce the abilities off each other, and the abilities were strong. I think there were things like ability, +1 to hit and things like that. They were very good. I think from a playstyle perspective, it's meant you now aren't as tied in to being next to your big knight. So actually, if anything, it's given knights a bit more ability to go and score. I think but they were still performing very well.
Yes.
They were performing very well.
Where are they now?
Prior to the towering changes as well.
They're performing very well. Second, third place from week to week. They weren't shifting too much.
No, so Imperial Knights dropped to just under 52% from 56. So small.
But what's that in the positions?
Small change. I think they're about 7th or 8th now.
Is that right?
1,
Okay,
2,
that's good
3,
change.
4, 5, 6, 7.
Oh, discounting Harlequins as a separate faction.
Yeah, they're sitting. And this is another topic of conversation. They're sitting just below Tau at the moment, who have come from nowhere.
Yeah.
And we've obviously seen the rise of the Tau.
Talking of Tau, there's no.
It was points.
It's just pure points.
It was the pure points. Yeah, huge points changes.
I was expected to go in there and bitch slap them some space points, and they were. When they came down, they deleted units.
The conversation
with
one of the Tower players we have at club, I think he had an extra 270 points he could put into his list. Pretty substantial, and that was without making a few changes to free up potentially another 300. So it was very, very strong.
Those battle suits pack a punch.
I was absolutely shocked. Yeah, I went in the same as you. It's like, okay, I'm going to get in here. I'm going to get them in melee, and I'm just going to
41%, 42%.
I'm just going to slap them about. This will be fun for me, not them.
You just don't get into combat now. That's the problem with Tau.
Each turn would just go, that's dead, that's dead, that's dead. I'm like, oh.
Tau used to be the Eldar of the world. Everyone hated Tau. There's not a game person who's been playing Warhammer for more than 5 years that doesn't hate Tau, and it's because they used to be the army that was, I'm just going to shoot you and take you off turn 1 and 2. And if I don't do that, you win, because you just walk into me and slap me to death. Because there was that no interaction. They just went, that's dead, that's dead, that's dead, that's dead.
Yeah. Like last night I watched a crisis suit unit put 46 saves onto a single unit, all multi-damage as well. So not single, 46 saves from one crisis suit unit, which is just nothing surviving that. So I know we've gone slightly off topic in terms of Imperial Knights, but I think
it was a good point. It's just because they're not on the data slate. It's only points that I've done.
Yes, it just point, and this is why I'm coming back to some of the comments about before. The changes they made, quite wholesome changes to Custodians, the way to T-Sums, to the way the armies play, and in other circumstances they've just changed points, and it's had the design impact. So I think it's a difficult thing to balance, but Imperial Knights are still very strong, they're still doing very well. I think the points increases they had a couple of months ago were justified. What's going to be interesting to see is what happens with towering, what sort of impact that has, because actually you've made the Knights a bit more survivable. They tend to take, unlike Chaos, they tend to run with 2 big Knights, a lot of the tournament armies, who can now hide.
I think they're going to struggle with Fields of Fire, Looking at a WTC map, in particular that we've been playing on a lot recently, those tables are dense.
Yeah.
Now, it's all well and good them being survivable, but if you've got a 500 point unit that you can't bring to bear, like if you don't get to shoot that for 2 turns during a game, that's a massive loss of firepower.
Yeah.
You've spent a lot of points for a lot of nothing, potentially.
Yes. Yeah.
So we'll see. Yeah.
And I think you mentioned that there's been some stratagem changes. I think they were good changes. A big knight for 1 CP being able to fight on death in combat is ludicrously insane, because you'd send, even if you sent an avatar or a Magnus or a big model in to finish that knight off on 2 wounds, and it's just like, well, here's my massive siege claw, I get to attack with 1 CP, and you're on the charge.
It's a bit unfair.
1 CP was too cheap, so I think 2 CP, I very rarely find myself having 2 CP I can spare on my stratagem at the moment, so I think that's a reasonable price. I think, the changes to their stratagem costs were reasonable.
I get why they had it at 1 CP, because you would be worried that, I've got this big, nice model.
It's done nothing.
It's done nothing, it's died, and I can't attack it. But at the same time, as an opponent against that, I've focused so much of my energy
you lose
to
your
take
unit
it out,
anyway.
and then you lose it anyway.
So I think 2 CP, if you can force 2 CP out of that unit, you know that cost now. You can perhaps put on a chaff unit in, or a lesser desired unit to take that. You're happy with that. So I think overall, good changes.
So we've got 2 more to go before we wrap up the podcast and the video. So we've got Leagues of Votan.
Votan, who have seen.
I don't know much about Votan. I've only played them in 1 tournament, and I didn't like it. Well, that wasn't because of the army so much.
From their win rate, I think they're coming up short, and not just because of the war.
They jumped. They were the bottom army with Admech, so they're at 32%. They're middling at 50%. Huge jump up. The army, like in Ninth, revolved around judgment tokens. The sooner you get your tokens out on those enemies, the sooner you're getting +1 to wound, you're getting +1 to hit, you're getting all these massive benefits that other armies are paying 150 points for a character to provide that to the unit. It was a subtle change. I haven't gone into massive detail, but I believe it is literally, depending on the army, you now just pick units and go, you have judgment tokens, you have judgment tokens, you have judgment tokens, which means you're starting the game already having those inbuilt benefits.
Well, there you go. So just to read it out for everyone. So at the start of the battle, select a number of units in your opponent's army, depending on the size. So obviously for in our case, it's going to be 2,000. So that's 4 units. Each of those units will now start with 2 judgment tokens.
Yeah, and
that's huge.
I think a lot of the Votan units went to ballistic skill 4, and there was a lot of questions around. Okay, why have they gone to 4? And the reasoning was, well, you're going to have judgment tokens, which are going to put you back to 3s. If we put you on 3s and tokens put you to 2s, it's too powerful. Then they come up against the Eldars of this world, who shoot you and then jump behind a building, so they can't get any judgment tokens on them. Armies that are running around the board that Votan can't catch in Grey Knights. So without the judgment tokens, the army was too weak. It needed those inbuilt modifiers to be strong. Now you can just look at your opponent's army. I believe it's post-deployment as well.
So, at the start of the battle.
So you can watch your opponent's deployment, and you can say, that one, that one, that one, and that one, that's where my judgment tokens are going. So you can actually build your strategy now around that.
Yeah, anything that lets you do after deployment.
Do you know what? You've put 2 squads of infiltrators in the mid-board, or they're getting judgment tokens.
Yes.
And inevitably, Leagues of Votan came out in 9th edition. When their codex comes out, they're inevitably going to get some more toys to play with. They've got a very limited lineup at the minute.
I hope so.
They have.
They did have a try and glow them up recently on the Warhammer Facebook.
Yeah.
They had that wizard dude. Who actually a really beautiful model, but I don't really like personally.
I quite like them. I've got a squat Necromunda team.
Yes.
And I've got the resources there. I've got some models to expand that into an army if I wanted to.
Nice.
But we'll see what happens with them.
Yeah.
So finally, bring up the rear, but by no means least, I should say Space Marines.
Yeah.
So this is another one where they've limited a unit number because there's so much hate out there.
And
what was that unit?
I hate Desolation Marines.
There's a good neutral opinion there from the
I'm
board.
going to stick to what I said earlier in this podcast, and I'm going to be honest and say I still feel like for those evil Space Marine players who went out and bought 30 Desolation Marines, to now only being able to take 15 at most. It's a bit of a kick in the teeth. If you've got your squad, if you've spent time painting them, this is why I never like these changes to unit sizes, because it affects people's investments.
Well, you're looking at someone who owns children 40 termagants.
But yeah, was it a needed change? This is where I come back to the point I made before. The problem was the volume of indirect fire that squad could put out. Why impact people's models? Personally, I would have changed the amount of shots. Or I would have modified the weapons slightly,
I would have
rather
modified
than
the weapons.
taking people's toys away. That's the bit I don't agree with. As a player playing into them, hell yeah, I'm happy there's only a squad of 5.
As someone who's been tabled by someone bringing out 40 million Desolation Marines,
Oh, for moment. 30 Desolation Marines, you're dead.
Well, that's the issue,
fun.
isn't it? By limiting it to 5, there's several things you're doing. You're reducing the willingness to spend a CP on it, because you're thinking, well, I'm not going to get that much return out of this.
Absolutely, the economics of
that includes Overwatch, for instance. With Open Moments and Overwatch, well, they can't do it anymore indirectly, so there's another hit to them. So several hits there. I don't care, I don't like the model.
Cost went up,
good riddance to them, frankly. Yeah, they did. But for me, the big change with Space Marines was all the good units got a big discount.
Yes.
Well, not all of them. I mean, infiltrators went up.
But let's remember, this is what they did for Tyranids. They reduced the cost of everything. They all got really happy and went, look at all this. And then a week later, the Codex went, oh, actually, this has gone back up to 90.
I'm sorry, so that's shit.
Yeah, let's see what happens with that. Good change to Space Marines. I would like to see less of them. I will just reiterate, I think it's unfair to play with people's toys in that.
Now everyone's just going to be playing my aggressors meta, which is just annoying me.
Yes, aggressors, eliminators.
Now I have to change my army because everyone else is doing it.
Well, I believe there's probably a load of Desolation Marines available on eBay if you're interested. So, probably get
link in the bio.
Some cheap deals. Get some cheap deals of Desolation. But again, good. For the benefit of the game, it was better. I just would have done it differently. Fantastic. If I owned the GW, I would have tweaked the weapons.
So that covers the data slate. Overall, I think a lot of people are pissed off about it because Eldar's still top. That's what I've got from the community. Personally, looking at the results, I think they've done reasonably well.
Overall, if you take a snapshot and look at it, you have to say, well, there's 10 more armies in the Goldilocks zone. The top ones have come down by 10%. You have to say it was a success on paper. I do think playing an army that was heavily impacted, like Thousand Sons myself, a few more games, I feel like I can push that 1% up again. And I think we'll see quite a few armies that have taken an immediate hit because they've had to rebuild their army from scratch.
Yeah, we're only a week, 2 weeks in.
They will come up, and that will in its nature will bring Eldar down because they're going to start to lose a few more matchups. So same as GSC, when you get used to know how to play in that with your new list, your new way of playing, the wins have got to come from somewhere. So maybe we'll get to this.
I think a lot of the people who went glory hunting into Eldar, I've been playing for 25 years, no glory hunting here, I can tell you.
Yeah. Apart from those Wraith Knights, I think
definitely. They stare at us from that shelf over there.
Actually pointing their decals this way as we speak.
What did you say?
I think you can only ever watch it once.
Yes.
A lot of glory hunters will move, and I think that'll have one or two effects. It could either go back up or it could go down again, because people who are chasing the meta might find something else.
Bring them,
yeah. So we'll see.
It will balance.
Luckily, that will never be Tyranids.
No, not on my watch.
Yeah, let's see. Again, I do think this Vanguard attachment's particularly strong. Once people have had a bit more time to play with it, get the nuances, I think we could see quite a strong.
So what I'd like to Adam and I, perhaps Ben, if you can find the time, we're going to break down and make a Vanguard list, because I think I played one this weekend and I read it. I thought, this is amazing. There's so many good combos in there, and it just shut down my secondaries. It just absolutely shut down my secondaries. I thought this was an interesting list to play against. So we'll get into that.
Powerful.
But for now, I think that covers us. So I'd like to thank Ben and Adam, and thank you all for watching as well. So
fun.
Yeah, it has been. Hopefully that was useful. Let us know what you think. Like, subscribe, and comment down below if you think we missed anything. Until next time.
I'm sure we have.
Bye bye.